Welcome to another episode of the Atomic Podcast. And this is, I'm losing track of the numbers of the episodes, but we're moving forward. One of the things that the Atomic Podcast tries to do, it tries to bring together different technologies and sciences so people see the interconnections, not only from an expert standpoint, but really from really kind of everyday standpoint. What are some of the technologies, approaches to the sciences, to the arts, that we actually see across people, across systems, across technologies, and of course, for the greater good of society. And I think the Atomic Podcast is really striving for those interconnections. And most of those interconnections come with you and me, the audience, with the people on this podcast, and the great work that they're doing. Today, I'm super, super excited. A longtime friend is with me today, and also one of the kind of a cultural phenomenon in terms of music and music production. His name is Bruce Lowe, and so today the theme is really talking about the phenomenon of music, music production, music creation. I'll give you a little background in just a minute on Bruce, and he'll give a much more fuller one. But also how music, parlays into aspects of brain function, of healing, of neuroscience. So there is the idea that we all enjoy music. It's the idea that music has a certain kind of essence and beauty, a certain kind of magic. And we all feel that. We felt that, the Greeks felt that, and before the Greeks, the Romans, and throughout time, the thoughts, feelings, and emotions around music has been profound for human community. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the science, but also about the experience of music, and also the actual creation of music. So I'll give you a little background on Bruce. Bruce is sort of one of those folks that I actually feel has created a life of production with some of music production, with some of the greatest really in the music business. It's really 4 decades of music, and really 4 decades of both creation and producing music, and also bringing together the beauty of music in his studio and other studios. He's worked with Stevie Wonder, he's worked with Elton John, Michael Jackson, and Madonna, and Paul McCartney, Quincy Jones. He's worked across gospel, soul, country, rock and roll, and so many other. He's designed 3 Grammy-winning records with Andrae Crouch, and he has many, many film credits. And I can't go through all the film credits. This will be one of those Academy Award moments where people will try to pull me off the stage. So I'll leave it to Bruce. Bruce, thank you so much. You're a gift to be on the Atomic Podcast. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Rodney. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and give the audience a little bit of background about you, and kind of how you came into music, both in terms of a producer, but also really as a musician.
Sure. I'll start at the beginning because of the relevancy of how things naturally took place for me that led to where I'm at today and what I've been doing for the last 4 decades. So first, I started playing piano at the age of 4, and I would listen to my sisters playing piano, and they would be taking classical piano lessons. And when they got done, I would go to the piano afterwards and try and emulate them the best I could. I kept that up for a long time. And after about 4 years later, I acquired a Silvertone acoustic guitar and started learning how to play popular songs with that. So I played in bands from junior high into high school. And in high school, the band that I was in was getting quite popular. Now, simultaneously, I have always been very curious about the electronics and how they worked. So I remember my dad bringing home a mono tape recorder that I fell in love with. And it wasn't enough to just record music and sound with it. I had to know how it worked. So I took it apart. And of course, I got in trouble, but I got it back in working order after learning a little bit more about the insides of it. So a big jump that led to my career in music and music production was when in high school, I was a junior and I got kicked out of the band I was in. And so the one of the players had a best friend and he wanted to be the singer and all that kind of high school stuff. And so that was that. And maybe for about a week, I was a little upset about that. But as it turned out, fate or whatever was on my side. I decided to woodshed and hone in on my craft of writing and recording music. So, jumping a few years to college, I needed money to pay for my tuition. And I lucked out to getting a job managing a high end music store called Swallens in Columbus, Ohio. So I spent every cent I made paying for tuition at Ohio State and buying music gear and maybe save a little bit for food, but and rent. Nevertheless, I got a great discount and bought some excellent analog keyboards, synthesizers, and a 4-track recorder. And then I started recording song after song. I was locked in my room and would just every second I had, I would be recording and practicing the instruments. Now, on the recordings, I was able to what's called overdubbing with a 4-track. So I could play on one track piano, on the next track, I could play another instrument like drums or bass and keep adding until the song was completed. So that forced me to learn additional instruments like drums and bass, some orchestral instruments. And I think the biggest thing was I couldn't afford to hire other musicians, so I had to do it myself. Meanwhile, I was lasering in on human behavior of music and sounds. So I bought a computer. I believe it was a Commodore 64 or 128. And at that time, computers did not have the capability of what I called at that time talking, or the ability to reproduce natural acoustic sounds and reproduce them, play them back. They'd have beeps in the computers, the games and all of that kind of stuff, but you could not take an analog sound yet. And so I, in addition to that, I'd always grown up wanting to do things to advance mentally and physically handicapped people. And so gluing all of these events together, then I had a dream that someday I could make computers talk, or in today's terms, figure out how to convert analog sounds to digital sounds, get them into the computer to play back. So, and I knew if I could achieve that, that what it would do for blind people or folks with neurological challenges or other challenges, causing them not to be able to have the same advantage of other people on the computers. So that was a big boost to me also. So now I knew how to write music, engineer, well, always still learning to this day. But I was getting used to writing music, engineering, producing, and playing multiple instruments, and had studied the effects of music and sound on humans, and also knew the inside of analog synthesizers. So one day, I was a junior, I believe, in college at this point, and one day I got a call from two of the biggest synthesizer designers in the world and most popular, who were Alan Perlman of ARP synthesizers and Bob Moog of Moog synthesizers. Eventually, a lot of people, when they mention synthesizers, would say, "Is that a Moog?" or something like that. They got known as that. That was Bob Moog. So they said that they had heard what I was doing and offered me a scholarship to Berklee School of Music. And I was honored. And so I put my Ohio State classes on hold and took them up on it and headed to Boston. Then I started out when I got to Boston and Berklee School of Music. I started out as a student, and after about a week, Alan and Bob laughingly blindsided me by saying now I was going to be the temporary instructor of the electronic music class. And I believe I was about 19 at this point, and I was shaking in my boots, scared to death because I kind of thought they threw me to the wolves, but then, of course, I did it and settled in. So during this, by luck, Stevie Wonder had heard of me and what I was trying to achieve. And so Stevie waited for me to graduate from Ohio State and called to offer me a job in Columbus, Ohio. And the thing is that was really exciting. We didn't have cell phones back then. And so what he couldn't see is, or he had didn't know, I had been dreaming of eventually working up to working with Stevie Wonder. He was the biggest or second biggest artist on the planet at that time. And so I just figured a lot of hard work, but it happened sooner than I had expected. And so by the time I had I believe I was 21 years old at that time. And Stevie knew of the multiple things that I could do making music. And being blind, he knew what an advantage it would be for him making music on computers with the conversion of analog to digital. He always tried to be ahead of the curve and prided himself on that in technology and so on, that would give him every advantage to recording his beautiful songs. So I accepted, well, and also a big part of his pitch to me was that if I moved to Los Angeles and worked with him, that he'd help me finance my dream of making computers capable of reproducing analog sound. So I accepted the job, moved to California, and this was November of 1977. And we actually didn't start everything. We just kept communicating and started working at the beginning of January 1978. And so then we talked, and we knew that we needed to delegate some of the computer coding to an expert, which I was not. And so we hired a person, Harry from Philadelphia, who was a professional PC coder. And so we custom adapted the ARP synthesizers and Oberheim synthesizers to Harry's PC, and we were successful at what is now analog to digital conversion. And Stevie also had bragging rights that when we did that, he had the very first analog to digital sounds on his record in the world, and that was The Secret Life of Plants. So there were the bragging rights for him as well as us. Now everybody takes it for granted, of course, their sound in on cell phones or computers, and we don't even think about it anymore. Meantime, during all of this process, I was fortunate enough to be able to work with very influential people and very highly respected music producers such as Bob Monaco and, of course, Stevie Wonder, and others who mentored me and taught me really how as professional as can be the music production and composition was done. And from that point on, I was fortunate enough to gather dozens of popular superstars that asked me to work with them on records and films also. Now, in my case, I also think it's relevant that I've always been very eclectic, listening and studying music all my life, such as Native American or blues, classical, jazz, rock, gospel, R&B, hip hop, rap, electronic, world music, and on and on. And I just felt like it was all a wonderful gift, and I just loved it all. So uh, through this, and it's very humbling to me. I'm super humbled for these opportunities to collaborate with these superstars that, um, and for the awards from the Grammys and the other visual awards and other thing. And I believe that everybody's teacher. So I hope I taught, and I hope and I know I learned a lot in the creation of composition, music production, and then the next thing is it led to working with, for example, with Stevie Wonder. I worked with Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, and a bunch of people working with him. And uh, we were pretty much neighbors. Michael was a neighbor at this point, and as in many other people, Andrae Crouch and Stevie Wonder's mom was like a stone's throw from my house, and um, we had Tom Petty on the other side, and Billy Preston, and so on. So we all were. It was pretty convenient for us to get together. I owned a recording studio. They owned recording studios, so we would bounce back and forth. Michael Jackson also befriended my brother, and so he really enjoyed coming over and could be incognito at my house, and we'd experiment a lot for a lot of the records, which actually I have these tapes of us experimenting that would turn into several hit songs that are known world around. And then through Stevie, then another client, Paul McCartney. And we started working together. Started out with Ebony and Ivory, and then we kind of took off from there, and that kind of a thing, and a few other tracks. And we became friends through that. And then, well, I had already worked as, like, I think I was 17. I kind of left this out earlier with Joe Cocker. And I was fortunate enough to be in this band with him that he had the most premier players on earth, called the Stuff Band. And with that, I was once again scared because how do I fit in with these great players? I couldn't hold a candle to them. So at that point, there was something I knew that they didn't, and that's how to play and orchestrate with synthesizers. So that's what I was hired for. It was short-lived for a lot of different reasons, but it was a big plus to my career. So then also Elton John. He had a record company called Teldec Records in Germany, and he wanted Bob Monaco and I to produce some records for him. So he'd call and show us some songs he'd written for an artist, Pat Gammon, was the first artist. And we recorded records for him. So I became friends, and he'd start coming over to the house, and we'd do things together too. And a lot of times Elton would just say, Bruce, I don't even want to know how the electronics work. Just do it for me, type of a thing. He was a crack up, no doubt about
Yeah.
it. A lot of
And
fun.
Bruce, let me ask you a question here, because I mean, this ability to bring together, the engineering, very early engineering, collaboration, with early computers, from analog to digital, the music composition, the production, um, and then your own work as a musician. All of these things are just super fascinating. That in a way you captured early on, and And so I want to ask you a question now, and maybe I'm fast forwarding us too much. But when people come to you now, ask you to do film scores and ask you to do, production work, or ask you to join in on a certain kind of piece as a musician, what are they coming to you? Are they coming from different directions to ask you for your talents in these different areas, or are they coming for like a central, I'll say, task that you can help them with?
Yes. All the
Probably
folks.
all the above.
Yeah, great question. It is all of the above. And it's kind of come along all of the above with almost every client I've had. So the main thing, of course, being producing and composing, but the engineering, I can do that and deliver for film and records and so on, as well as editing and all the things that go along with film and TV. In 2008, I was signed to Warner Brothers for the composing television music. And so with that, and I'd have a small staff working with me. But I normally would have between 14 and 17 shows airing at any time. And I think today probably have about 14 more. They're all Warner Brothers shows. And what they would do is I'm giving you this example and answering because it would cross over into the feature films, from The Color Purple to The Lion King and so on. It was pretty much the same, but still there's a little bit of a backstory to that I can get into a little bit later. What they would ask me to do is compose, produce, engineer, edit, mix, master, and deliver on an average 10 tracks, and have it all done in about 7 days. And so it was speed, writing, everything. And that goes back to the analog days. You couldn't really get that achieved in 1 week using all the tape decks, which I love still, but we had to use the digital reproductions in order to be able to get through it in enough time to deliver what they were asking for. Now, with films like The Lion King, that is relevant to Andrae Crouch and my partnership. I started working with Andrae Crouch in the early 80s. He had asked me to help him design his records, and we hit it off. It was fantastic, and I would probably consider him one of my favorite out of all of my credits was Andrae Crouch. I think I learned the most. I think he crossed over into the genius of like Mingus or Coltrane, Davis, on and on. But I learned so much from him, and it was gospel, R&B gospel. But then, as we were doing that, and I hate to put it this way, but bragging rights is every record I co-designed with Andrae won multiple Grammys. So we were rewarded pretty heavily with each one of those records. Now, then the process was, here's Quincy Jones, enter Quincy Jones. So I hadn't really worked with him before, but Andrae had. But I was working with Michael Jackson, and then so the combination between Stevie and then Andrae, Quincy Jones, and Michael then brought us all together for a Quincy Jones record, which was called Back on the Block. And what is cool about this story, he had Quincy. It had rap, hip hop, pop, R&B, jazz, straight ahead jazz. It was quite an eclectic record. So we were pretty well suited for it. But Andrae and I had an idea. Let's adapt gospel music and the choir arrangements for other styles of music, such as hip hop rap. This was brand new. It had never been done before. And Quincy was just the guy to let us do it. And so his title, Back on the Block, is a hip hop rap thing. So Quincy joins other artists like Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Miles Davis, Joe Zawinul, and a bunch of really hip hop wasn't very big at this point. So, and rap definitely wasn't. There were only a few popular big rap bands at that time. So, a song had been written. Quincy would send me a cassette and say, "What would you guys do with it?" I would be considered the glue, try and translate the craziness of Andrae Crouch, and which then we would do a demo taking that cassette, send it to Quincy Jones, and had so we were able to be as far as I can tell, the first gospel choir that we did a bunch of stuff on hip hop rap music for Quincy. That led into all of the other songs. So Michael Jackson, there's a dozen, probably more than that, songs that we were influential on with the same method with Quincy Jones. And we did record after record with Michael, and he kept coming over to the house, and we'd do experiments and all that we would eventually use or re-record with those concepts of our experimentation, where he could be free, to do.
Bruce, this is so excellent. I'm sorry to jump in on you, but I just want to say this idea of you from very early on being a glue across styles, across technology, is super fascinating, and you've stayed true to that. I want to ask you really two questions, if I may. One is, how has the production and creation of music today, and I really be quite specific, more recently, changed for you? And has it changed? Are you still the glue? Are projects coming to you in the same way? I kind of asked that before, but then the other thing is that you mentioned something really early, is that the idea of being able to go from analog to digital had a kind of enabling function. And what I mean by that is that it could help others that may have a disability. You had that idea early. And then, of course, you worked with Stevie Wonder, that kind of was the full package, And so my first question is, what has changed in your career in terms of the kinds of projects you're doing? I know you mentioned Warner Brothers today. And also, tell us maybe a little bit more about this idea of music having the ability to help, to heal, to enable.
Okay. Great points and question. As far as the creation and production of music over 4+ decades has changed greatly. I've run through so many different things. There are things that we still do, which is more the music side, but we have to marry that to the technical side in order to reach the masses, to bring them the love, the joy that we want to express. So that's important, to stay up with the technology. So, Rodney, I can talk till the cows come home on this, so stop me if I talk too much on it. But
yeah, I was just going to say, what kind of technologies are you referring to here specifically?
Okay, there technologies such as, when I started out, you run the gamut of working with a mono tape deck. Then I got a 4-track tape deck. Then we got an 8-track. Then we got a 16-track. Then a 24. Then 224. They're all tape decks with tape running across them. Well, that was fantastic, and that sound is to this day fantastic. It's got a fullness, a sound that we know is scientifically pleasing to human beings. Nevertheless, we came up with different ways that created a whole lot more efficiency and ability to complete projects where we'd be under pressure, time allotted pressures, which would also relate to budget and so on. So things for some examples, editing. On any given song, there are going to be many edits. We used to take the tape machines and take the reels, if you can see my hands, and rock these reels over the tape head so we would know where to take the razor blade, cut the tape, and splice tape together to format correctly for the projects. And that goes, I would say 100% of the time we had to do that kind of stuff. Now, that would take, let's say for a single edit, 10 minutes, sometimes longer than that. Gospel music was one of the more challenging, but we still pulled it off. It'd take a little bit longer. Now it takes about 5 seconds to do the same thing. So when you have hundreds and often many thousands of edits per album that we do, doing the math saves us weeks of time just for that alone. And then the precision of being able to lock a digital sound to frame accurate film or TV projects made all the difference. Also made it a whole lot easier where we could watch the film locked, and it may sound like, you know, where we're in the studio and you could always see the film that you're scoring to and that kind of a thing, but now you're locking to the computer, and that technology changed for efficiency also. So we could get it according to the format technology of the film or TV show, but let's call it an average of 30 frames per second, which needs to be pretty that precise on the edits. So there you go again on back to.
And Bruce, what about the other end of things, which is now you have a finished product and you want to distribute it? How has the digital universe changed in getting out the music?
That it has changed drastically. And so, for example, streaming takes over. There was no such thing, of course, for the first 10, 20 years. And streaming was a big factor. And being able to, now we have the converters, and we put the music, if we want to communicate with the masses around the world. Now we have the internet, now we have streaming and so on, that we didn't have earlier. We would press vinyl and have the records done that way. And then you'd go to the music store, go to the record bin and buy your records, and then cassettes. We had then 8-tracks. Remember the old 8-tracks that some of us would have in cars, short-lived, but then we had CDs. And now we have USB sticks or streaming in our cars even. That technology is crucial, but we had to also adapt business-wise. Once streaming came along, then if the music wasn't being basically stolen, and it was being paid for with it, we have currently battled and battled to get this formula, which is not good. It takes today approximately 1,500 streams to equal one album sale. And so that means that primarily what you're doing is using streaming like we used MTV before. It had cost to do the videos, but we didn't get paid or royalties to have them on MTV initially. And so they were promotional tools. Today, the music is a virtual tool for branding the artist. Most popular artists today on the radio, main thing is branding, and they're going to be selling perfume or liquor or tennis shoes or whatever, and it is an avenue, and especially to go see them in big concerts for the biggest artists, that because you cannot make a living really on just simply streaming music these days, where you can make a good living selling records in the past. So we had to adapt to that also. That was crucial to stay in business with everything. So the once we ran the gamut on that, here's, between analog, the tape decks, and digital, on 100% of my projects, I split the difference. I use both on every project, every film, and so on. So it enables us. Now, then I am fortunate enough to work with Steven Spielberg on The Color Purple. With the main composer for the score was Quincy Jones, and Andrae Crouch wrote the songs and the gospel and the song arrangements and that kind of a thing. Back to I was the glue and putting this together. So Steven Spielberg would call me. Andrae was notorious for being late in delivering, and he would say, Bruce, can you tell me when you're going to? And Andrae couldn't be too pressured to deliver, often late. But Steven told me he was getting ready to shoot a scene in a church that everybody needed to be in step with. So he said, could you at least send me the drum track? And I locked in the tempo and sent that to him while Andrae completed the composition of that piece. Well, what Steven kept teaching me the art of filmmaking, but the advantage of the visual and the audible being connected to the neurological or the brain was all relevant to his success. And I was like a kid in a candy store, that you lock it all together. Now with digital, that took a long time to achieve those goals. Now it doesn't take as long to achieve those goals.
And Bruce, can you perhaps go to and describe for the audience that journey that you now are on? Not just in the music production, which is amazing. All this is so incredible, but in healing. Going back to those first kind of impressions that you gave us about how music can actually enable people. Tell us a little bit about your nonprofit, a little bit of how music, as you mentioned, the neurological, how this parlays into aspects of healing, and what has been your experience there in your new organization?
Oh, thank you for asking. My foundation, Music Has Healing Power.org, is very dear to me. Through my life, and seeing the struggles of people, and even having it in my family, knowing that music really does have healing power. As the progression of time happened, it well, let me take a half step back here. When I was about 7 years old, my sisters would take me to facilities like hospitals and nursing homes and so on. And I witnessed the reaction of people that with music that was brought, whether it be live or recorded music, and saw the positivity, and it was contagious. So another profound experience in my life that led me to dedicating myself to this was the last year of my grandmother's life was spent in a nursing home. And my brother Keith and I would go to visit my grandmother. And I remember our initial visit, that the doctors and nurses had a talk with us and warning us that she is no longer able to communicate. There's no expressions, there's nothing in response to, maybe she hears us, Maybe she doesn't when we talk to her, but we'll assume she does. So we went with that positive, yet at the same time, we didn't believe it. We had to find that out for ourselves. Let's see if we can change that up. Well, so what happened was my brother, he's being half silly, but it worked out fantastic, organized, it was Christmas time. And he organized a Christmas party in the lobby that had an acoustic piano in it. And it took him about a half an hour with the nurse's help and so on. And he gathered about 50 people together. And little did I know I was going to be playing piano and getting everybody going with it. Well, we put my grandmother in a wheelchair, wheeled her out, sat her next to me, and we start playing and singing. Then we saw a woman close to us who was crying. And after a song, stopped and asked her what we could do to help her. And she told us the story that she had severe arthritis, and you could certainly tell she did with her hands were very deformed at this point. And it was a sad story, but she said, I was a pianist, and my greatest joy was playing piano and playing music. And so I brought her up and sat her next to me on the piano bench and gave her a part, even with the shape of her hands, and said, asked her to play this part for all of her friends and show them you can still play piano. She did. And the crowd went wild because that's their good friend, and singing and laughter and so on. I look over at my grandmother, who medically said she couldn't express anything with her. That wasn't true. She was smiling, nodding her head, and it looked as if she had a tear in her eye. I couldn't swear to it, but it sure looked like it. So that was a big thing for me to say, hey, I'm witnessing this kind of joy, this kind of difference, and so on. So then what happened was, now we can prove the things that I just said. We know different factors that are involved uh, in the healing power of music. So, from a medical clinical standpoint, we have the methods to prove that it lowers blood pressure and manages stress and helps alleviate pain and improves pain tolerance. It helps access expressions and enhances memory. The list can go on. Improves mindset and promotes rehabilitation and reduces length of hospital stays and so on. Those are big advantages to get hospitals and uh, other facilities that are dealing with
And Bruce, do you work with clinical organizations? Are you and or your staff collaborating with clinicians in hospitals? Give us a little picture of what that looks like.
We sure are. 2016, along with my colleague and good friend David Atmore, we started the Music Has Healing Power Foundation. And with that, we were fortunate enough to partner with a major hospital across America, Shriners Hospital for Children, as well as Gibson brands, Gibson guitars, and Epiphone guitars, Kramer, Remo percussion, Zildjian cymbals, Maestro effects, KRK studio monitors, and so on. Now, with these partnerships, what we have achieved, including the pandemic, so we were shut down for a couple of years, basically from the pandemic, but we have built 17 music rooms in hospitals, and provided the instruments and the ability for these kids to go into these music rooms and record their music and relieve the stress. And when we two of these hospitals are in Mexico City and Tijuana, which are affiliated also with Shriners. We're about to well, also I've done the same for child abduction centers, as well as addiction rehabilitation places and so on. We provide the instruments for their dedicated music rooms, and we're about to embark on a project with a veterans organization that has 31 locations in the four Western states in America. And so we're growing. Of course, we always need help from philanthropists and support from people and so on. So bearing that in mind, I would encourage anybody listening to please visit musichashealingpower.org for more information, and feel free to contact us.
That's great, Bruce. It's such a one. Your background is such a beautiful story, but where you've taken that story is also equally beautiful, and how many lives you've touched and are going to continue to touch. I have one like final question. I have many questions, but I just we'll probably have to put a period at this on this. So, someone 17 years old, kind of like you, right? That's coming into the music business, or I should say, coming into being a musician with, interested in, production. They have a desire on technology, but they just love the music. What advice would you give them for those coming into music today? That what are the tools they need, and what kind of future do you see for them?
The top 40 has changed drastically also. And it's important for myself, being in the business forever, or newcomers, the 17-year-old that you mentioned, to study not only the most popular top 40 music, but study, listen, and enjoy, from jazz to bringing it through. Well, how did we get to this point? What did the Beatles do to get to what they did? How does Beyonce or Taylor Swift get to what was the process, where you're thinking Native American music, going into the blues, going into some pop, and some might call rock and roll, then into rock and roll, but pop music, into metal, which today is considered pop anyway for the 17-year-olds. Our what we called metal doesn't work for them anymore. It's a different ball game. And study. The old days, people were rapping before rap became popular. You could look at Jimi Hendrix. You could look at different blues players, and so on. But I believe it's crucial to do that kind of study in order to remember it when you're creating music. Something fresh and something familiar combination works. And for producers and composers to understand that, for popular music, under those categories, then study up. Also, one other thing is that I highly recommend that the young, up and coming composers, producers study the human reaction to sound waves. That, to me, has always been a gold nugget of longevity, because through those studies, you can find out what frequencies, what keys that best move the muscles of the people that are listening to it. We're aware that the people don't care, that they don't want to. They work hard during the day. They raise families, pay bills, and so on. They're not going to analyze it. It's just consciousness. It's emotion. Hey, I feel sad. I feel happy. I feel like dancing. I feel like relaxing. And you can't argue with it. But For the professional, the question is, well, why? What is causing that neurological motion of the listener to enjoy that? Is it the lyrics? Maybe. Is it the rhythmic motion? Maybe. And so on. Those are very important. I can tell you what are the best frequencies for dance music, but then you have to combine it. There's another consideration: the singer. What ranges can they sing in at their optimum level? So you're not going to that's number one. You don't want to sacrifice that, but get as close as you can to the frequencies that move certain muscles in people, that make them get on the dance floor if you want that, make them relax if you want that, so on. So that would be my main advice
This
to.
is so wonderful, because really what you're saying is, as someone comes into music, is super interested in music, an emerging musician, is they're really an artist and a scientist. They really are a creator and a producer, someone that is the glue, someone that does create, but also that someone that is fascinated with the why behind those frequencies. Um, Bruce, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what a person you are, how sincere you are, the life you've led, and the life you're going to lead. So thank you, and and
uh,
I'm sure we'll have other conversations.
Rodney, thank you so very much. It's a joy, and spread the love with you. You're a wonderful person, and I'm honored for the opportunity to be here with you. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take good care.
You too. Take care. See ya.